Let's talk about distractions, reflections, pulls, light imbalance, wrong focus, and color cast. Light imbalance and pulls, that's a very easy thing to explain because it's visual. So if you look at this image now, the lighting is really balanced, right? It's just wherever you look, more or less, the lighting is even, and we can admire the whole track. You can clearly see it's separated from the background, and you can calmly basically go through the track, through every single detail, and examine it, right? But what we can do is grab this light here and pump it to, like, let's say 7,000, and now you're gonna have light imbalance, okay? Because first you get drawn here to the back, where it's the largest amount of light. So the brightest areas are in the back, okay, so in this corner. And that's just a no, guys. Don't do that, because it will pull attention of the viewer to a wrong spot, okay? It's like putting too much weight on the scale, okay? And you're just gonna heave to one side. Don't do that, because unless you know what you're doing and you're using light to focus in a specific area, that's a different thing. But that's not the area of focus, at least it should not be. So if you're going to pull to area which should not be in immediate focus, and kind of like should not be a major anchor, then it means you have a light imbalance. So your light pulls to a certain area. So you need to balance it down back to where it was, or find a sweet spot, and find a balance of light. Okay, that's one. Reflection is gonna be pulls as well. Like, for example, this reflection here in the glass will for sure draw attention, because we're gonna put some lights into them, and this is gonna be a really strong strong pull. But you can also create pulls with reflectivity of materials. So if I'm gonna dial it down back and make it really reflective, this could actually balance off the reflections on the top. So if I'm gonna grab these two mats, right, and I'm gonna sort of grab this one and copy it over, so they're both gonna be really reflective, and I'll do the same thing with, let's say, wheels. So you can see now everything is being kind of reflective, so the top is balanced by the bottom. So when I'm gonna render it now, it's gonna be actually pretty cool. So when you're using reflections, okay, or when you have something reflective, you bloody make sure that it's being balanced by everything in the image. So in this particular case, right, a reflective material is gonna work because you have a really strong pull on the top, okay? So you could use reflections to your advantage. But what I want you to be careful and aware of the fact that reflections will pull a lot of attention. Now the distraction is gonna be shadow and kind of like casts created by light sources, the reflectors. Like, for example, you see in the right hand side here, that's a massive pull, okay? I mean massive. That's a distraction you want to remove, because it just makes no bloody sense. So what you want to do in this case, you want to save this image, right? So let's save it as TIFF number 3, okay? And I'm going to bring it to Photoshop, and I'll show you what to do with it. Okay, so here we're in the Photoshop, and if I had the image like this, what I would simply do, I would, create selections here, use the lasso or whatever, hold shift to add to selection, and then I would go here to edit and run the content aware tool on it, okay? This will usually remove everything that you don't need in the image. This algorithm is pretty good, so look at this. Do you see what I mean? That's a distraction. You don't want that. You need to understand you need to realize what you can remove in Photoshop, what you can get away with in Photoshop, what you need to remove in Blender, what you can't remove in Blender. And that's the key of understanding how to work with lights, rendering and so on. When I shoot photographs, okay, I know what I can get away with. All right, I know what I can remove in Photoshop. I know I cannot change body language, but I do know I can change a lot. Okay, I can edit a lot of stuff that I don't need or I want to remove. But certain things like body language, lighting, it's extremely difficult to impossible to change. So you make sure you're gonna get them right. So when you get the lighting right, it's a beautiful lighting, very even, a lot of reflections, but they balanced, okay, with a very calm background. And on top of that, now you can actually start building your image. So now you can start, editing, adding some, color cast, toning, and so on and so forth, right? So you see, that's starting to become something cool, right? And when you don't have any distractions in your image, it's going to be way easier to edit it. So, you know, either remove them in Blender or remove them in Photoshop. Okay, sometimes distractions like these shadows may be very difficult to remove in Blender, because I'm guessing that this shadow here is caused by the light. So if you're gonna go to lights here, which are, where are they? Let me see which light is causing this. Probably the top light. Yeah, see, the top light is causing it. So I'm guessing this light is not big enough. Boom, look at this. And just increase the light size a bit. Pump this power here to 3500, you know, and hang on a second. This 30,000, right? So 35,000, right? And it should be peachy. So now you see destruction removed. So just occasionally you need to find it. Then, you know, you could introduce more reflections in the ground. So you could just, you know, we could bring them back in to the image and make this background really reflective, okay? So we could bring the reflections in. And since we got rid of this and the lighting is quite even, we can start playing with reflections on the foreground. So I think this is gonna be a little bit more interesting, because we're gonna get some, you know, some reflections in the bottom. Now I want you to look at one more thing, okay? Look how very closely in terms of toning and brightness and color is this back of the truck with the background. That is too bright, okay? Way too bright. We made it darker because we wanted to remove reflections and all that, but this, in my opinion, is a little bit too bright. So that's actually not the destruction, but that is basically not enough separation, which is also going to be confused to the viewer, because they will not know, you know, where the object starts when it begins, okay? So here what we can do is we can change the quality of the mud to either more reflective or more rough. It's going to be darker, you see. So then when you're going to re-render this, just this small change, you will see that it's going to separate this truck from the background much better. You see what I mean? Look at that. That is way better, because now you have a very clear understanding where this truck ends, okay, when the background begins. So your eyes don't have to think too much, your brain doesn't have to think, it can just admire. You can lose yourself in the image, right? So be careful with that. And the last one we're gonna talk about is gonna be color cast. And color cast can be used to your advantage if you know what you're doing, okay? So let me just wait for this to kick in. So if I grab this plane, for example, and, you know, made it, let's say, really blue, this floor will be reflecting light back onto the truck, especially if it's going to be brighter, okay? You see what I mean? So the truck's going to start becoming blue. So if that's what you want, that's cool, but remember that every single reflection here is going to become from, you know, kind of dark, muddy, bluish into really saturated blue. So you can use color cast as a tool, but, you know, be careful. So to sum it up, guys, it's very easy, okay? Avoid pulling focus into the wrong place in your image using lights. Try to balance lights in a way that visual weight of your image is kind of evened up. Although you can pull into specific areas, like for instance, we are clearly pulling to this bar, to both these frontal elements, to the wheels a bit, and to the top. So there's a massive triangle here with a, you know, pull in the middle that will basically draw you into the face of this truck, which is what we want. That's what we want you to look, right? So you can use reflections and pulls, but you need to know where to put them. They cannot be accidental. You don't want to pull someone to the back wheel. That doesn't make any sense. So make sure you know what you're doing with your lights, right? Like I said, start with one light, then add second light. Okay, so now this is how it works. Then avoid reflections in incorrect areas. Again, these are going to be pulls, right? They're going to pull your attention to an area you don't want to go to. Try to create balance with reflections, you know, intensity of light, colors, okay, darkness, brightness, and also, you know, pay attention to separation. That's really important. You want to clearly separate your model from the background. In fact, what I would suggest doing, right, I would suggest going to compositing, removing this glare, okay, so you can hold control and right click and remove this by dragging your mouse. This will remove the glare, and I want to remove the glare because glare will actually create, when I want to render this without a background, it will create kind of like an outline, you know, kind of like a bloom around this light, and it will affect my selection. I want to have a clean selection. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the background completely, and I'm going to render this without a background. Now, why? because I want to have a cutout of this model, right? And I don't want to see the background. So here, to be able to render alpha background, we need to actually switch on the transparency here and of the HDRI. And now you're gonna have an image with alpha background here, right? So what you can do is control click this in Photoshop to create a perfect selection, and you can use curves or other tools in Photoshop to change the brightness or darkness of the background. So I'll show you this trick in a minute. It's really powerful, okay? You can also use that for adding stuff in Photoshop, like for example smoke behind the behind your model. But when you save this image, you'll make sure you're gonna save it as RGBA. Okay, if you save it as RGB, alpha background will not be included, so make sure it's RGBA. Okay, and then we're gonna bring it to Photoshop, right? So I'm gonna bring both to Photoshop, right? And this cutout here. Let me just cancel this and bring this here. So I got a cutout on top of my image now, right? It's a perfect match. So I'm going to turn it off and control click that, right? Then I'm going to go here to curves and click on curves. And you see now that my curves include the truck, but do not include the background. I want to flip it around, okay? So click on the mask and control I and watch this. Now what I can do, I can adjust my background, okay, independently from the truck, right? Now be careful, because when you overdo this and you're going to have halos on the truck, which means backlight, you will have these kind of funny halos here, so you can't overdo it. But you could go brighter very easily on that. You see what I mean? You could easily go brighter. In addition to that, you can inject color. Go to blue channel and, for example, inject some blue in the highlights, right? Here, you can change the color of the entire image by simply having a cutout, okay? This comes all down to your skills in Photoshop as well, because you can, like I said, remove a lot of stuff in Photoshop. But the better you have, the render to start with, the more powerful your final render will be. Now, finally, when you render something, try to render stuff in as a TIFF, okay? You could use the OpenEXR, but this is an absolute bastard to open with Photoshop, so I don't recommend it. Start with TIFF, RGBA, 16-bit, and, I don't use compression usually, okay? These are my settings. And the higher you go in resolution, the better, right? So that would be all you need to know about distractions, pools, reflections, imbalance, wrong focus, and color cast.